2 nights before my sister's big farm launch. I came home and found my grandmother missing from her own bedroom. The house was glowing like a luxury retreat. Guests were already booked, and behind the old tool shed, I discovered something that made my blood turn cold. I grew up believing my grandmother's farm was the one place in our family that could never be corrupted. It sat on the edge of a small town in northern Kentucky, spread across 40 acres of uneven pasture, old apple trees, and red soil that stained your boots for days. The house itself was not impressive. The porch sagged a little on the left side. The paint peeled every summer no matter how many times we fixed it. The kitchen windows rattled in winter. But to me, it was sacred ground, because everything there had been earned. My grandmother, Martha Bell, had built that place with her own hands beside my grandfather, long before I was born. After he died, she kept it alive alone. She rose before dawn, fed chickens with arthritic fingers, mended fences with a back that had no business lifting lumber, and somehow still found time to make biscuits big enough to cover a dinner plate. The farm wasn't just property to her. It was proof that a hard life had meant something. My sister Vanessa never saw it that way. She was 3 years younger than me, sharp-faced, beautiful in the polished way magazines like, and always chasing the next version of herself. In high school, she decided our town was beneath her. In college, she started correcting grandma's grammar at the dinner table. By 30, she had turned herself into one of those women who spoke in brand names, called every random purchase an investment, and posted filtered photos with captions about gratitude while treating real people like furniture. I'm not saying Vanessa was born cruel. I think that would actually be easier to understand. What made her dangerous was that she believed every selfish thing she did was intelligent. If she used somebody, she called it strategy. If she lied, she called it managing perception. If she hurt you, she'd tilt her head, smile sadly, and explain that emotions were making you irrational. Grandma used to say, "Your sister always did know how to make poison sound like medicine." Back then I laughed when she said it. I stopped laughing the year I came back and found out what Vanessa had done. At the time I was 37 and working as a regional contractor for an agricultural equipment company. My job kept me on the road most weeks, moving between counties, meeting suppliers, inspecting warehouses, and fixing logistical disasters created by men in air-conditioned offices. It paid well enough, but it kept me away. I visited Grandma whenever I could, called her every Sunday, and sent money when the roof leaked or the tractor coughed itself half to death. Vanessa, meanwhile, had recently reinvented herself again. After failing at real estate, then online coaching, then some ridiculous boutique candle business, she suddenly became obsessed with hospitality branding. That was her phrase. Not bed and breakfast, not rentals, hospitality branding. She claimed rural luxury was the future. People from cities wanted authenticity, but curated authenticity. They wanted chicken coops that looked good in photographs, hand-woven blankets nobody actually used, antique milk cans on porches, and reclaimed wood signs with things like "Breathe Deeper" burned into them. I remember the first time she pitched it at Sunday lunch. Grandma was carrying a bowl of green beans to the table. Vanessa had her tablet propped open beside her sweet tea, sliding through photos of whitewashed barns, string lights, clawfoot tubs in the middle of fields, and wealthy couples grinning beside fire pits they'd probably lit for exactly 7 minutes. "People pay insane money for this now," she said, tapping the screen with a manicured nail. "The Bell Farm has heritage, land, a pond, original structures, a story. It's wasted as just this, just this." I still remember how Grandma's hand paused in the air for half a second before she set the bowl down. "What's wrong with just this?" she asked. Vanessa smiled the way people do when they're humoring a child. "Nothing is wrong with it, Grandma. I'm saying it could be more. You're sitting on a gold mine and living like it's 1987. I felt my jaw tighten. "She's living on her farm, Vanessa. Not every square foot has to be monetized." Vanessa didn't even look at me. "That's exactly why you stay small, Caleb. You think survival is noble just because it's familiar." Grandma changed the subject then. She always did when Vanessa got that tone. Not because she was weak, because she hated ugliness at her table. A month later, Vanessa moved into the farm temporarily to help Grandma organize finances and improve the property. That should have been my first real warning. Vanessa never did anything temporarily, unless she intended to plant a flag in it. At first, the changes sounded harmless. She repainted the old guest room. She ordered new linens. She hired a local guy to pressure wash the porch. She put the farm on social media and started posting romantic nonsense about restoring legacy through intentional design. Strangers online ate it up. Comments poured in. Bookings followed before the place was even ready. When I called Grandma, she sounded tired, but she insisted everything was fine. "She's got big ideas," Grandma said one evening. Her voice thinned through the speaker. "Too many words for simple things, if you ask me. But she says it'll bring money in." "Do you want this?" I asked. There was a pause, a long one. "Well," she said finally, "I want the taxes paid. I want the fence on the west side fixed. I want that backfield cleared before winter. If this helps, maybe I let her try." That answer sat wrong with me. Grandma never talked in maybes about her own land. Still, I let myself believe it was manageable. That was my mistake. I treated Vanessa like a nuisance when I should have treated her like a threat. Over the next 3 months, the farm stopped sounding like home whenever I called. Grandma told me the kitchen table had been removed because it wasn't camera-friendly. Her old quilt chest was taken out of the hallway and put into storage because Vanessa said it made the entrance feel cluttered. Family photos disappeared from the walls. In their place came neutral paintings, baskets of fake lavender, oversized candles, and decorative signs with phrases that sounded like they were written by a woman who had never fed livestock in the rain. Even the animals became props. Vanessa started calling the chickens the girls in videos. She tied ribbons on the goat pen during one photo shoot. She had a photographer come out at golden hour and stage mugs on hay bales, as if Grandma's life had been waiting all these years to become a background for people from Nashville celebrating anniversaries. Every time I visited, something else was gone. Granddad's old rocker from the porch, the cracked enamel basin from the mudroom, the worn sofa where Grandma used to nap after lunch. Vanessa always had an explanation. Too old, too ugly, too rustic in the wrong way. She said things like that with a straight face, which still amazes me. The last time I saw Grandma before everything broke open, she looked smaller. That's the only way I can explain it. Not physically, exactly, spiritually, like she had started folding herself inward to make room for somebody else's ambition. She met me outside near the side garden with dirt on her hands and a smile she had to force into place. I hugged her, and her shoulders felt too light under my arms. "You eating enough?" I asked. She chuckled softly. "Listen to you. Sounding like your grandfather. You look tired." "I am tired." That came out before she could stop it. I stepped back and looked at her. "What's going on?" She glanced toward the house. One of the upstairs windows was open, and I could hear Vanessa inside talking loudly on the phone, using words like upscale, immersive, and target clientele. Grandma lowered her voice. "She says opening weekend has to be perfect. Says first impressions determine the whole season." "It's your house," I said. "Why are you talking like a guest in it?" Grandma looked away. That was the moment I knew something had shifted beyond redecorating. Something rotten had taken root. I went inside and found Vanessa in the dining room, measuring the wall above the fireplace. "What exactly are you doing here?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "Increasing the property value." "No. I mean, what are you doing to Grandma?" That got her attention. She turned slowly, tape measure hanging from one hand, expression already sharpening. "I'm saving this place," she said. "You're welcome, by the way. You've stripped the house bare. I've elevated it. You've erased her." Vanessa laughed once, short and dry. "Oh, please. Don't be dramatic. Grandma is fine. She just doesn't understand presentation. None of you do." I stepped closer. "If she doesn't want this, it stops." Vanessa's face changed then. The smile stayed, but her eyes hardened. She signed the operating agreement. My stomach dropped. "What agreement?" "The one that gives me management authority over the property for 18 months. Revenue share, renovation discretion, booking control. Totally legal." "You had Grandma sign legal documents?" "She is not incompetent, Caleb. She chose progress." I wanted to put my fist through the wall. Instead I said, "Show me." Vanessa shrugged. "Maybe later." That was when I realized she thought she had already won. I left that afternoon with a headache pounding behind my eyes and a feeling I couldn't shake. On the drive back, I called a lawyer friend from Lexington and asked a few careful questions without giving names. By the time I got off the phone, my hands were slick on the steering wheel. An elderly homeowner, a family member handling business decisions, pressure, confusion, signature on documents she may not have fully understood. It was worse than I thought. Opening weekend was 5 days away. Vanessa had already listed the place as Bell Orchard Retreat, a refined farm escape. The photos were everywhere online. White sheets, copper tub, orchard picnic baskets, sunset wine on the porch, where my grandfather used to shell peas in silence. People had paid thousands for that first weekend. And 2 nights before the first guests arrived, Grandma stopped answering my calls. At first I told myself she was asleep, then that her phone battery had died. Then I called again, and again, and again. By the 6th call, my heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I got in my truck and drove to the farm in the dark, with gravel spitting under the tires, and one thought pounding through my head the whole way. If Vanessa had pushed too far, I was done being reasonable. By the time I turned onto the farm road, my pulse was hammering so hard it made my vision feel narrow. The house was lit up like a wedding venue. Warm amber lights glowed from every downstairs window. Strings of Edison bulbs had been hung across the porch and out toward the side yard. Lanterns lined the gravel walkway. From a distance, it looked beautiful. That was the sick part. Vanessa had dressed the place up so well it almost hid the fact that she had hollowed it out. I killed the engine and stepped out into the cold night air. The first thing I noticed was silence. Not farm silence. Not the honest kind. Full of crickets, creaking wood, distant cattle, and the shuffle of an old house settling after sundown. This silence felt staged, controlled, like the property was already performing for strangers. I went straight to the front door and tried the knob. Locked. That made no sense. Grandma never locked that door unless she was leaving for church or headed into town. I knocked hard enough to rattle the frame. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, and called out, "Grandma? Vanessa?" Still nothing. Then I noticed a black SUV parked beside the barn and another car I didn't recognize near the back fence. Vanessa must have had contractors there late, or photographers, or some idiot she'd brought in to tell her where to place throw pillows in a farmhouse built before his grandfather was born. I cut around the side of the house, boots sinking into damp earth, and that was when I saw the light, a thin yellow strip coming from behind the old tool shed. I stopped cold. The tool shed sat about 40 yards from the house near the garden fence. It had always been exactly what it sounded like. A shed, rusted nails in jars, shovels with splintered handles, old seed bags, mouse droppings, Granddad's bent wheelbarrow tire leaning against one wall. Nobody lived in that thing. Nobody could, but the light was real. I moved faster, my breath turning sharp in my throat, and came around the back just in time to see a small extension cord snaking across the ground from the side of the main house to the shed door. My stomach dropped. I yanked the door open. For 1 second, my brain refused to understand what I was looking at. Grandma was sitting on a narrow army cot pushed against the far wall beneath a hanging bulb. She had a quilt over her knees, a paperback in her lap, and one of those little space heaters glowing orange beside an overturned milk crate. Her clothes were folded in neat stacks in 2 plastic bins. An old thermos sat on a stool next to her. Above her head hung garden tools, rakes, pruning shears, and twine. My grandmother looked up at me as if she had been expecting the storm the whole time. I couldn't breathe. The air in that shed was stale and cold and smelled like dust, oil, and old wood. I felt it hit the back of my throat like a slap. "Caleb," she said softly. That was all. Not surprise. Not panic. Just my name. I stepped inside, then stopped because my legs suddenly felt weak. "What the hell is this?" Grandma closed the book in her lap. "Keep your voice down," she whispered. I actually laughed when she said that. Not because anything was funny, because I was so close to losing control that the sound just escaped me. "Keep my voice down," I said. "You're sleeping in a shed." She looked at the floor. It was the way she looked down that broke me. Not ashamed. Not exactly. More like she was trying to spare me the full ugliness of it, by not making me say it louder than necessary. I crouched in front of her, every muscle in my body tight. "How long?" Her fingers tightened around the edge of the quilt. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I felt heat rush up my neck so fast it made my ears ring. 3 weeks. I repeated. "She put you out here for 3 weeks?" Grandma swallowed. She said just until the launch. Said guests pay more if the whole house feels exclusive. For a second, I couldn't hear anything except the heater ticking. And my own pulse. She made you move out of your own room, I said. She said the master suite photographs best if it looks untouched. I stared at her. And you agreed to this? Grandma's eyes finally met mine, tired and glassy in the weak light. I agreed to something very different. There it was. The truth I had been feeling circling us for weeks. I sat down on the overturned bucket by the wall and leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to keep from smashing my fist through the side of the shed. Tell me everything. She took a breath. Slow, careful, like each word had to pass through pain on the way out. Vanessa had told her the farm needed short-term rentals to stay afloat. Taxes had gone up. Insurance had climbed again. The roof over the west wing needed repair before winter. Vanessa promised a simple arrangement, a few weekend guests, some cosmetic updates, enough extra money to keep the farm secure and make things easier on everyone. At first, that was all Grandma thought she was signing. Then Vanessa started bringing in furniture, photographers, and work crews. Then came the rules, then the schedules, then the phrases like guest experience and premium privacy. Grandma said every objection was treated like confusion. Every memory she had tied to the house became an inconvenience Vanessa claimed she was too sentimental to understand. She kept saying it was only temporary, Grandma said, voice barely above a murmur. Every time I pushed back, she said I was forgetting the bigger picture. And the bigger picture was you sleeping next to fertilizer and hedge clippers. Grandma flinched. The second I saw it, shame hit me hard. Not mine, hers. She was embarrassed that I had seen it. That made my anger even worse. I'm sorry, I said quickly, rubbing a hand over my face. I'm not angry at you. I know, she had no right. Grandma gave a tired smile that looked more like pain. Rights and manners stopped being the same thing a long time ago. I asked why she hadn't called me, why she hadn't told me the second Vanessa moved her out. Grandma looked toward the house. She said if I made trouble before opening weekend, she'd lose the bookings and the deposit money. Said we'd be in worse shape than before. Said you'd come charging in and make things uglier. I let out a breath through my teeth. She was right about one part. Grandma's mouth twitched, almost a smile, then vanished. I stood and looked around the shed again. The bare bulb, the cracked concrete floor, the draft slipping in under the door, a basin of water on a stool, a plastic bag with medicine bottles inside. It was all arranged neatly, which somehow made it more obscene. My grandmother had tried to make exile look orderly. That was when the rage inside me settled into something colder, cleaner, dangerous. I said, pack your things. She blinked. Caleb, no, pack your things. Tonight. And go where? With me. Hotel in town. Anywhere but here. She shook her head almost immediately. If I leave before guests arrive, Vanessa will say I abandoned the agreement. She'll twist it. She already twisted it. I know that. Her voice sharpened for the first time. But if I disappear, she'll turn me into the problem. And there are contracts now. Deposits. Vendors. People coming Friday. If this blows up wrong, the farm gets dragged through court, or liens, or God knows what else. That stopped me. Because she was right. Vanessa loved paperwork, the way some people love knives. She didn't just hurt people, she built files around the hurt, so she could call it procedure afterward. I stood there in that shed, jaw clenched, forcing myself to think. Do you have a copy of what you signed? I asked. Grandma nodded toward one of the plastic bins. Blue folder. I dug through sweaters and old receipts until I found it. I opened the folder right there under the weak yellow bulb. Management agreement. Property operations addendum. Temporary relocation acknowledgement. Temporary relocation acknowledgement. My hands started shaking. Vanessa had actually put it in writing. Not in plain language, of course. Buried in paragraphs full of evasive, polished garbage. But it was there. Acknowledgement of owner's voluntary short-term transfer to detached auxiliary structure during high-yield occupancy launch phase. Detached auxiliary structure. That was how my sister had turned a tool shed into a business strategy. I looked at the signature line. Grandma's name sat there, in unsteady pen. Vanessa's below it. Witnessed by some local notary, whose name I didn't recognize. Did you read this? I asked quietly. Grandma's silence answered before her words did. Vanessa read it aloud, she said. Said it was standard. I closed the folder carefully, because if I didn't, I was going to tear every page in half. All right, I said. Then we do this another way. Grandma watched me, worry lines deepening around her mouth. Caleb, don't do something reckless. I looked back at the glowing house. No, reckless is what got you here. I walked her to the main house after that. Not because she was staying there, but because I wanted to see Vanessa's face when I came through the door with the truth in my hands. She was in the kitchen island area, with a laptop open, and two women in expensive coats sipping wine. They looked like the kind of women who said words like darling to waiters, while never looking them in the eye. Vanessa was showing them table styling options for breakfast baskets. She turned when she heard us. Her smile flickered. Only for a second, but I saw it. Caleb, she said lightly, you're late. I held up the blue folder. You put Grandma in the shed. Both women went still. Vanessa's eyes flashed. Then she recovered. Can we not do this in front of people? One of the women looked between us. Vanessa, maybe we should. No, I said. Stay. Since apparently this is all about presentation. Grandma stood in the doorway behind me, small and silent, hands folded over each other. I could feel the humiliation in the room like a bad smell. Vanessa set her wine glass down with careful precision. Mother of God, Caleb, stop being theatrical. Grandma agreed to a temporary setup, so the property could generate enough revenue to survive. A temporary setup, I repeated. That's what you call a cot in a tool shed. It's insulated. I swear to God that was what she said. Something inside me went white hot. One of the women made a small shocked sound and put her glass down. I took one step forward. You moved her out of her room, out of her house. And you stood there and sold this place online as some peaceful luxury retreat while she slept next to garden fuel. Vanessa's face hardened. Everything I did was for the farm. No, everything you did was for yourself. That is such a small-minded take. I laughed again, harsher this time. You know what's small-minded, calling cruelty upscale, because it comes with booking fees. She crossed her arms. If you ruin opening weekend, you ruin the only profitable move this property has seen in years. That was when I understood her fully. Not just what she had done, what she still cared about most. Not Grandma, not the farm, not the family name she loved to parade around when it sounded elegant. Opening weekend, reviews, momentum, her new identity. That was the nerve. And once I saw it, I knew exactly where to put the knife. I looked at the two women by the island. Did you know the owner of this property has been sleeping in a shed, so your guests could feel exclusive? They both looked horrified. Vanessa, one of them said quietly, is that true? Vanessa's voice went flat. This conversation is over. But it wasn't. Not for me. I walked to the mudroom phone charger, unplugged Grandma's phone, and handed it back to her. Keep this on you, Vanessa snapped. You are sabotaging a business operation you don't understand. I turned back to her. No, I understand it perfectly now. Then I took Grandma out of that kitchen and drove her to the motel in town despite her protests. Despite the lateness of the hour, despite the fact that she kept saying we should wait until morning. I checked her into the cleanest room they had. I brought in her bins, her thermos, her medicine, and the quilt from the shed. When she sat on the edge of the bed, she looked around like a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to take up space without apologizing. Before I left, she grabbed my wrist. Caleb, she said, voice trembling. Please don't burn the whole family down. I looked at her hand holding mine. The swollen knuckles, the blue veins. The hand that had fed us, patched our jeans, buried our dead, and still somehow signed papers because she trusted blood not to cheat her. I'm not the one who lit the match, I said. Then I stepped out into the cold parking lot and called the lawyer from Lexington again. This time I gave him names. By the time I hung up, I had a plan. It wasn't fast, it wasn't loud, and it wasn't illegal. It was better than that. Opening weekend was in less than 48 hours. Vanessa thought she was about to unveil her masterpiece. She had no idea she was about to open the door to her own public ruin. I barely slept that night. I sat in the motel parking lot for almost an hour after leaving Grandma in her room, engine off, forehead against the steering wheel, staring at the pale yellow glow of her curtain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shed again. The cot, the heater, her medicine in a plastic bag. The extension cord dragged through the dirt like her dignity had been hooked to the house and only allowed a few feet of power. By dawn, the cold rage inside me had sharpened into something steady. I drove back to town, met my lawyer friend, Daniel Mercer, at a diner off the highway, and spread every paper I had across the table between coffee cups and sugar packets. Daniel was the kind of man who looked too relaxed to be dangerous. But once he started reading, his expression changed. He flipped through the agreement, then the addendum, then the relocation acknowledgement. His jaw worked once. "She notarized this," he said quietly. "Yeah. She had your grandmother sign a temporary transfer based on occupancy optimization language. Say it like a normal human being." He looked up at me. "She disguised forced displacement as operational necessity." I stared at him. "Can we stop her?" Daniel took a breath. "Yes, but not by screaming, not by changing locks, not by putting hands on anyone. We do this correctly, and she won't be able to spin it." That was all I needed to hear. By noon, Daniel had already contacted the county clerk for property records, verified title structure, and confirmed what I had suspected. Grandma was still the sole legal owner of the farm. Vanessa had management authority under a limited operations agreement, but only if her actions were reasonably tied to property benefit and owner consent remained informed and voluntary. Daniel tapped the page with one finger. "If we establish coercion, misrepresentation, or abuse of authority, this agreement collapses." She lied to Grandma. Good. Lies are useful when documented. That became the plan. Not revenge through chaos, exposure through proof. First, I got Grandma to sit with Daniel in the motel room and tell him everything from the beginning. Not fast, not emotionally, clearly. Dates, conversations, who was there, what Vanessa promised, what changed, when she was told to leave her room, when she was moved into the shed, whether she objected, what Vanessa said when she did. Grandma hated every second of it. Not because she was confused, because she was ashamed. I sat beside her while she talked, and more than once she stopped to apologize, like being humiliated by your own granddaughter was somehow bad manners on your part. Daniel was gentle with her. He explained things in plain language. He asked questions twice when he had to. He made notes. He recorded a statement with her permission. By the end, Grandma looked wrung out, but lighter somehow. Like once the truth was spoken aloud, it no longer belonged entirely to her pain. Then Daniel asked the question that changed everything. "Martha," he said softly, "do you want the opening weekend to proceed?" Grandma stared at her hands for a long time. Finally she said, "Not if I have to disappear for it to happen." That was enough. Daniel drafted a formal notice, suspending Vanessa's operating authority pending legal review for potential fraud, coercion, and elder exploitation. He arranged for service that same afternoon. He also advised me to notify Airbnb directly through their emergency trust and safety channels once we had the affidavit, photographs, and evidence of owner displacement. So we got evidence. I drove back to the farm with my phone camera and Daniel's paralegal, a woman named Reese, who was all business and no wasted movement. We photographed the shed exactly as it had been: the cot, the bins, the heater, the medicine, the extension cord, the garden tools overhead. We photographed the main bedroom that had been staged for guests like a showroom. We photographed the removed personal belongings boxed in the garage. And because the universe occasionally shows up right on time, Mrs. Harlan from 2 properties over saw us there and came walking up the gravel drive in her gardening clogs. She squinted at the shed, then at me. "You finally found out?" I turned to her. "Found out what?" Her face darkened. "That your grandmother's been sleeping out there half the month while your sister prances around with florists and photographers." I felt Reese glance at me sharply. Witness. Mrs. Harlan didn't need much prompting after that. She had seen Grandma carrying blankets to the shed. She had heard Vanessa tell a delivery guy that the old woman prefers the outbuilding because it's quieter, which even Mrs. Harlan knew was garbage. She had also seen guests on a preliminary walkthrough, while Grandma avoided the porch and stayed out of frame. Reese took down every word. By late afternoon, Vanessa was served. I wasn't there for it, but I heard enough. Daniel had the notice delivered in person at the farm just as final cleaning staff and a catering van were arriving. Vanessa apparently read the first page, laughed, then stopped laughing by the second. She called Daniel within 5 minutes, furious, and left him a voicemail so hostile he later told me it was the kind of message lawyers pray people leave. She said he had no authority. She said Grandma was unstable. She said I was jealous and vindictive. She said opening weekend involved high-profile guests and contractual obligations and reputational risk. What she never said, not once, was that Grandma had not been sleeping in the shed. That mattered. That evening, the first cancellation came in, then another, then 4 more. Airbnb had placed the listing under urgent review based on owner safety and occupancy misrepresentation. Refunds were frozen pending investigation. One of Vanessa's content partners pulled out after hearing a rumor from one of the women at the kitchen island. A local caterer demanded payment in advance. The photographer stopped answering her calls. Apparently, luxury collapses fast when people realize the rustic charm comes with elder abuse. Vanessa called me 17 times before midnight. I didn't answer once. The next morning, she came to the motel. I saw her through the window first, marching across the parking lot in cream boots that had no business touching real gravel. Her hair was perfect. Her sunglasses were huge. But even from inside, I could see the damage. Her movements were too quick, too sharp. Panic dressed as control. I stepped outside before she could reach Grandma's door. She stopped in front of me and yanked off the sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I folded my arms. "Protected Grandma. You sabotaged a six-figure launch." "No, you did that when you moved her into a shed." Vanessa laughed in disbelief, but the sound cracked in the middle. "You are blowing this so far out of proportion." "Am I?" She agreed. She was manipulated. She signed the documents. "You lied about what they meant." Vanessa took one step closer, voice dropping. "Do you know how much I've put into this? Do you know what it takes to build something at this level? Branding, vendor coordination, booking funnels, partnerships." I cut her off. "She is your grandmother." For the first time, something ugly and naked crossed her face. "I was trying to save the farm," she snapped. "No, you were trying to own it without buying it." That landed. I saw it in the way her mouth tightened, in the way her shoulders went rigid. "Grandma doesn't know what to do with potential," she said. "She lets things rot because she's sentimental. You worship that because you're scared of change. I'm the only one in this family who sees what this place could be." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "And that is exactly why you will never touch it again." Behind me, the motel room curtain shifted. Grandma had heard enough. She opened the door slowly and stepped outside in her cardigan and house shoes, looking smaller than she should have, but steadier than she had the night before. Vanessa turned and immediately changed her face. Softer eyes, sad smile, injured granddaughter mode. "Grandma," she said, "please tell him this has gotten out of hand." Grandma looked at her in silence. I had seen my grandmother angry. I had seen her grieve. I had seen her exhausted, amused, stubborn, and kind. What I had never seen until that moment was disappointment so complete it seemed to empty the air around it. "When your mother was born," Grandma said quietly, "I held her and promised I would raise a family that knew what home meant." Vanessa's expression flickered. Grandma went on. "Somewhere along the way, I think I confused ambition with character. That was my mistake, Grandma." "No." Her voice sharpened. "You do not call me that in the same breath you used to justify what you did." Vanessa went pale. "You put me out of my room," Grandma said. "You touched your grandfather's things, moved my life into boxes, and told me to be grateful while you sold strangers a version of this farm that had no place for me in it. You were not saving anything. You were practicing on me." Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came. "And now," Grandma said, "you are done." That should have been the end of it. For most people, it would have been. But Vanessa had one more card to play, and like always, she chose it badly. That afternoon, she posted online a long, tearful statement about family conflict, protecting elderly privacy, and misunderstandings weaponized by jealous relatives. She never named me, but she described herself as a woman entrepreneur under attack for trying to restore ancestral land. She implied Grandma had chosen to stay in the outbuilding for peace, and that I was exploiting her confusion. The post might have worked too, if we hadn't already moved. Daniel had anticipated exactly that kind of performance. Within an hour, we responded through proper channels, not with insults, not with threats, with facts. A formal complaint was filed. The listing review intensified. The County Elder Services Office opened an inquiry based on the sworn statement and evidence. And Mrs. Harlan, may God bless that woman forever, commented publicly under Vanessa's post before it could be cleaned up. "That's a lie. Martha slept in that shed because you cleared her out for guests." I watched it happen. Then another neighbor chimed in. Then a local handyman who had been told not to mention the old lady's setup to potential renters. Then one of the women from the kitchen admitted she had no idea the owner had been displaced and called the whole thing disturbing. Vanessa deleted the post, but screenshots were already everywhere. That weekend, instead of opening with champagne baskets and influencer reels, Bell Orchard Retreat sat dark and empty while a locksmith changed the access codes under Daniel's supervision, and Vanessa hauled designer pillows into the back of her SUV with shaking hands. She did not go quietly. She cried. She threatened. She accused me of destroying her future. At one point, she actually said, "Do you have any idea what people are saying about me?" I looked at the farmhouse behind her, at the porch my grandfather built, at the windows where my grandmother used to wave us in for supper, and said, not as much as they'd be saying if I'd done what I wanted to do the night I found her. That shut her up. Her parents, our parents, arrived the next day. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. I had been so focused on Vanessa and Grandma that I forgot what scandal does in a family. It summons everybody who failed quietly the first time and wants a better seat for the second. My mother cried as soon as she saw Grandma. My father kept saying he had no idea it was this bad, which may have been true, but it didn't comfort anyone. They had both been dazzled by Vanessa's language, her spreadsheets, her confidence. They thought she was modernizing the farm. They did not ask enough questions. That was their sin. Neglect dressed as trust. Grandma didn't scream at them. That made it worse. She just said, "I needed protecting from my own blood, and none of you saw it." My father actually had to sit down after that. The legal fallout took months, but the moral verdict landed in a day. Vanessa lost every scrap of authority over the property. Grandma revoked all permissions. Daniel helped restructure the farm into a protected trust with clear restrictions, so no one could ever again exploit her through vague management agreements and polished lies. A local bank officer worked with us to stabilize taxes. We sold a disused back parcel to cover repairs and create a maintenance reserve. Not glamorous, not luxurious, just honest. And for the first time in a long while, the farm started breathing again. Grandma moved back into her room. The first night she slept there, I stayed in the hallway longer than I needed to, listening to the house settle around us. No staged music, no scent diffusers, no curated silence, just old wood, an attic draft, distant frogs by the pond, and the floorboard near the kitchen that always popped once around 10. Real life. A week later, we carried the cot out of the shed and burned it. Grandma insisted. "Not because I'm bitter," she said, standing beside me as the flames curled the cheap metal frame black, "because I don't keep things that taught somebody they could put me away." That line stayed with me. So did what came after. The farm never became a luxury Airbnb. It became something better. Grandma started hosting seasonal workshops with local women, canning, quilting, bread baking, orchard pruning, seed saving, real things, useful things, things she actually knew. We fixed the guest room and rented it occasionally through word of mouth to traveling teachers, nurses, and 2 different widowers who needed quiet more than aesthetics. People who came for rest, not performance. I started spending more weekends there, more than weekends. Eventually, the road job lost some of its pull after all that. Funny how almost losing the center of your life makes you stop orbiting the edges. As for Vanessa, the family didn't exactly explode. It split in a quieter, more permanent way. Some fractures don't make noise, they just stop carrying weight. She moved to Nashville within the month. Tried to start over. Rebranded herself again. I heard through cousins that she called what happened a small-town overreaction to innovation. That sounded exactly like her. I haven't seen her since. Grandma hasn't asked too. Sometimes people think justice has to look dramatic. Public screaming, police, courtroom speeches, somebody collapsing in tears while everyone claps. But that isn't how it felt to me. Justice looked like my grandmother walking through her own front door without asking permission. It looked like her slippers back beside her bed, her quilt chest returned to the hallway, her teacup back by the sink, her voice coming from the porch one evening saying, "Caleb, come taste these peaches," like the whole house had remembered who it belonged to. If you've ever watched someone kind get pushed out of their own life by somebody louder, sharper, more polished, then you know the ugliest part isn't the cruelty itself. It's how easily everyone starts adjusting around it. That's what I can't forget. Not the shed, not even the papers. The fact that it almost worked. The fact that if I had waited one more week, Vanessa would have had her opening photos, her glowing reviews, her proof of concept, And my grandmother might have spent a whole season being erased in plain sight, while people paid premium rates to admire her life. I think about that a lot, and every time I do, I hear Grandma's voice from the motel parking lot. Please don't burn the whole family down. I didn't, but I did turn on the lights, and sometimes that's enough to show everybody exactly what they've been living with.